Good morning. Good morning. Can you take your seats? We will start in a minute. Please take your seats. Good morning, everybody. I'm very pleased to see the room almost full, because this is a generous session. We have two topics, a total of 78 million euro funding, up to maybe 13 projects. So, because there has been some confusion about what is the topic in this session, so I just clarify it right from the beginning, so that you know that you are in the right place, in the right room. So it's this topic that you see on the screen. I'll start with that. ICT2018, supporting the emergence of the data markets and data economy, also known as the data platforms, the personal data platforms, the industrial data platforms. Okay, so that's the first topic. I will also present DT ICT11, big data for energy. It's in this same session. So it will be after this presentation. I try to do this modular, so if you just are interested in one of them, I try to close this one first and have the answer the questions. I don't know if it works, and then I will do the DT ICT11 afterwards. We have 45 minutes. So my name is Kimmo Rossi. I work in Luxembourg, DG Connect Unit G1, Data Policy and Innovation. So our unit is responsible of the two sides of the medal, the policy, data policy, which includes regulatory measures like the Public Sector Information Directive, which is currently under review. There will be a new version of the PSI directive. And then we are involved in maybe not all, but most of the data-related policy actions. Maybe not leading all of them, but involved in all of them, like the free flow of data and so on. So, but I'm responsible for the calls and the topics, evaluations, things like that, more concrete things. So the project portfolio from the Horizon 2020 program, which is under a public-private partnership. So there is a PPP, for big data value, so these topics belong to the portfolio of the PPP. I'm going to present now the topic ICT13A. So this topic ICT13 has three parts, A, B, and C. The B and C parts have already undergone selection. So the research and innovation actions and the one CSA project, they have been selected already, and they are about to start. They have either started 1st of December, or they will start in January. This presentation and this open call is about the ICT13A innovation actions for the data platforms. So it's the last bullet point, which actually supports the policy actions, because the policy is about making data available. So these data platforms are the concrete action by which we want to contribute to this objective, making data assets available. And this time it is the open data. It is not the open data anymore. This is about the closed data. So in our previous actions, we have covered open data. This time we target exclusively closed data. So proprietary, industrial, commercial data, personal data. First of all, always refer to the work program that you find on the participant portal for any checking of any facts, parameters, requirements of the call. Don't trust what I tell you here. So if I say something wrong, I'm not liable. Please read the work program. This is something I always insist. So in a nutshell, this challenge of the ICT2018 data platforms is to support the data economy by setting up and operating data platforms. So the words setting up and operating are very important. So it's not a theoretical activity. We expect actually these platforms not only to be developed, but to be operated and populated with meaningful data assets, so that their utility can be demonstrated in a live environment, in a realistic environment with real data, real scale data as well, in the lifetime of the project. And as I said, the focus now is on closed data. So data that is in some way proprietary, or it is some way confidential, contains personal data, or any combination of these. And this means that the proposals should address all the necessary technical, organizational, legal and commercial aspects of closed data, so that it's no longer open data. The problems and the challenges are totally different now that you are dealing with closed data. You have to think about license agreements, about copyright, about protection of personal data. So to simplify this task, which is difficult, to simplify, we have divided it into two sub-areas, but I say it immediately that proposals can address one or the second or both. So this articulation is not entirely, rigid in that sense. So first of all, if we take personal data platforms, very important there is, the first thing to say is that the platform should ensure the compliance with the prevailing legislation. In addition, it should allow the data subjects and data owners, so that the people whose personal data is being handled on the platform, so those people should remain in control of their data and the subsequent use of their data. So this means that the platform may have to in some way limit or restrict or at least manage the flow of personal data, but in doing so it should maintain, preserve the utility of the data. So these seem to be two conflicting goals, but that is why we are asking for solutions for this interesting and challenging objective. So there will be privacy and utility trade-offs, and you should describe those in the proposal. Solutions should also develop privacy metrics that are easy to understand for data subjects. So this has become very clear with the introduction of the GDPR, that there are all kinds of compulsory statements and declarations and consents, but the data subjects may not be in a position to understand what they mean. So it's very important to make it clear to the users, to the data subjects, what is going to be done with the data and what options they have to control it, and to make this as simple as possible, as transparent as possible. So visually, terminologically, as easy as possible. Then we have industrial data platforms. And this is for any type of commercial and industrial data. It can be also, it can contain personal data, or it might be something without personal data from manufacturing plants, from IoT sensors, data that is completely machine-generated, not necessarily containing personal data. So this is why I say that we allow the mixture of the two bullet points in one proposal. We allow that because we know that industrial data sometimes is personal data. If it's, for example, data of a telecom operator, it will contain data about the users of the mobile phones, for example, their positioning data and identification. So at the same time, industrial and personal data. So here we are asking for automated and robust controls of compliance, including automated contracting, and how to monetize, how to make sure that the remuneration of the use of the data assets will go to the owner of the data, to creator of the data. It sounds simple, but it is very difficult to achieve. And there are no established business models. The business models are just taking shape. So that's why you should also describe the business model in your proposal. So here's a list of what project proposals should address. First, as I said, setup and operations. So this is a very practical call. So we are not asking for scientific or research-oriented projects. Populate the platform with realistic and meaningful data. So you will need data providers, at least you will need contact to data providers for this exercise to be meaningful. Use relevant, robust, privacy-preserving technologies. So any privacy-preserving technology that you think is useful and that works, use it. Trusted and secure sharing of data, that goes without saying. Then the number of transactions in this kind of platforms is such that you most likely cannot do with normal, traditional, conventional case-by-case contracting license agreements. You need probably to rely on automated contracting. And this is why we mention it in the work program. It is possible. Automated contracting has been experimented for decades already, but it's probably has not made a breakthrough yet. So we are hoping that funding these platforms will help to automated contracting license agreements to make a breakthrough. Sustainable and realistic business model. As I said, how do you monetize? How do you make sure that this operation is meaningful and profitable for the operator and for the data owners, and still attractive to the buyers? So, as always, people always ask what to avoid in a proposal. So here I have a smaller collection of the things to avoid. So we are rather generous in this call. There are more things that we are required, but less things to avoid. So we don't want to see small-scale, unrealistic sandboxes or toy demonstrators. We have enough of them already. So we are trying to make a scale-up with this exercise. Don't bother to present something that is not compliant with the prevailing legislation. It will not fly. We are not going to be very happy with proposals that say that we don't care about GDPR. This is our proposal so don't do that. It will not fly. I tell you right now, so you have no right to complain afterwards if your proposal is dismissed. So research, we don't want research experiments. Whatever you suggest must be technically mature. It must work. So you have to convince in the proposal that it works. We have had all kinds of previous calls in the big data topics, and every time we have a new call, we see recycled proposals from previous calls. So if you recycle this time something from the old calls, make sure that the proposal is genuinely new, genuinely different, because this is the first time we're asking anything like this. So you cannot recycle old ideas as such in this call. It's not possible. Even for the ICT2018 research proposals that we called last time, they would have to go a long way to maturity and operations to be convincing in this call. There is some additional information mentioned also, this is mentioned also in the footnotes of the work program, may be useful reading on what already exists, and studies on industrial and personal data platforms. What we already have is that some of you may remember that we had a topic ICT2018, privacy preserving technologies. So remember, I mentioned the previous slide that please employ any privacy preserving technologies that you think is useful, meaningful for the platform. So we already have 4 projects working on such technologies, and they have been running for 2 years already and are delivering results. So have a look at them, and maybe you are even involved in one of them in one way or the other. We have the portfolio of, as I mentioned, the research project from the ICT13 about to start. So some started already, the others will start 1st of January 2019. These are the impact statements in the, as they are in the work program. I will not read through them, but I just remind you that you don't need to fully address every single impact bullet point in your proposal, but it's important that you describe in the impact section of your proposal what is the contribution of your project to these impacts. And by the way, they continue here, so that there are even more tangible, measurable impact indicators with percentages. And people always ask, what is the baseline for these percentages? So what do you compare against? My answer is, you tell us in your proposal. You tell us what is the baseline, and how do you improve that baseline. So you see, it is very, very generous, very open. It gives you a lot of freedom, creative freedom, I hope. So the call is open until the 28th of March 2019. The budget is 48 million euro. Indicative project size is from 4 to 6 million euro, which means that we will have approximately 10 successful projects from this call. And refer to the call page for further details and link to the work program, and link to the submission system. And that's all. And I will now take questions for this topic, because then those people who are not interested in the energy topic, they can leave. Go to another, please. Go.
Robert Voigt from POC. One question, is cascade funding also an issue?
Sorry, can you repeat?
Cascade funding also an issue, that for experiments that technology can be used by SMEs, so we ask for SMEs for micro experiments using the platform?
Sorry, I didn't understand your question.
Is in the budget 4 to 6 million, is it possible to reserve some parts for cascade funding? So that
okay, cascading, yes. Now, not in this call. So remember that financial support to third parties, also known as cascading grants, is a possibility that needs to be specified in the work program. If it's not mentioned in the work program, it's not possible. In the other topic I will present afterwards, it is possible, but not in this one. So important. Thank you for the question. Yes.
Just another question. Do you expect to have one proposal for each axis, or could you envisage proposals which are addressing both personal data and industrial data?
So you're asking for the distribution of between these 2 bullet points, these 2 lines. We have absolutely no rule for that, so it will be the survival of the fittest. So it will be the Darwinian selection, which means that we just evaluate the proposals, and according to the scoring, they will be selected from the top to the bottom, and we will select as many as we can afford to fund. And it will just be by chance what is the distribution between the 2 bullet points, so how many personal data platforms, how many industrial data platforms. It may be that they are all personal data platforms or that they are all industrial platforms if those proposals just happen to the best ones. Okay?
This is Alberto Crespo from Atos. So what is the expected technology readiness level of the outcomes for this innovation action? And second question, on automated contracts, what is the expectation or what is the understanding on that from the writers of the code?
Okay, the expected technology readiness level is very high. I don't want to give a TRL number, but very high. As you can read, it's between the lines of because you need to operate the platform with scaled up data. So not only small toy data sets, but real size scaled data. So very high. The automated contracting question is again, you tell us. Because it really depends also very much on the type of data. So if you are dealing with music files and you are trading that, it's probably a very well regulated area already, and how to handle license agreements. And then compared to IoT sensor data from a production plant, maybe a totally different licensing scheme. So that's why we do not prescribe any contracting schemes, because it so much depends on the type of data that you are trading. But it's about data trading, and that's why the contracting is an important issue. And as I said, most likely traditional manual contracting will not work when you go up in the scale, and that you need some sort of automated procedures where a smart human being, the contract manager or a lawyer, contract lawyer, has pre-programmed the constraints, the conditions to the trading algorithm, and then the trading algorithm somehow automatically concludes deals within those limits. So it could be something like that, but you tell us rather than me telling you. Okay, yeah, please go ahead. Yeah, in the front row.
Okay. So 2 quick questions. First is Antonio from Hop, data economy company for smart cities. So the first question is, are you expecting short-term projects like 24 months, 18 months, just to go straight forward to the market, or you expecting more classical 36, 48 months project?
Again, this is something that we don't want to prescribe, because it depends on many things, and I would say that above all, it depends on what you already have, because many proposals actually, I have a feeling that they will build on something existing, some existing platform or some existing scheme that is already maybe operating in a small scale or maybe only in one country. So scaling up something that exists, you may be able to do that in a shorter time. So 2 years might be a realistic time frame. If you have to do more setup operations, then you may opt for 3 years duration, but that's up to you to decide what is the appropriate time frame.
So sorry, I have a second.
Yes.
So regarding the first question, we understand that short period projects with a huge impact are welcome in some way, if this makes sense for the impact of the project.
What do you mean? Previous?
No, like short period, like projects, the length of the project.
Okay. So
for the
yeah,
business,
well, if you want to have a very quick action, 18 months, you better have something existing, and you have to describe it well in the proposal what it is, because otherwise the evaluators will say 18 months you cannot achieve anything, except if you have it all figured out already, and you will just scale it up and populate it like that, and you need to know the data asset, the data providers, so that from day one they will be able to populate the platform with data.
And the second question is because you remark about GDPR, but there is also now machine data regulation. I guess that these proposals should also address 100% the machine data regulations.
And the burden is unfortunately with you, with proposers, in knowing what legal framework applies to you. And that's why we simply say that you have to make sure that you are compliant, your proposal is compliant with the prevailing legislation. Sorry, I have to move ahead with the next topic because at the time, otherwise I will have no time to present this topic. I'm available after the session for discussion, so I have nothing special to do until noon or so I will be around. So let's move now, let's take the second presentation, Big Data Solutions for Energy. This is a very exciting topic. The previous one was also exciting because we are asking the data platforms for the first time. This is something we are also asking for the very first time. So this is totally new, totally novel. What makes it even more interesting is that we are not alone in designing this topic. So we have been working together with real experts of energy systems from the DG Energy Unit C2, which deals with new energy technologies, innovation and clean coal. So they know everything about smart grids and what is important for smart grids. And we discussed with them a long time ago. We realized that there are huge data processing challenges, analytics challenges, prediction challenges in smart grids. So maybe our data scientists and our data projects could be helpful in telling your grid operators how to predict the grid behavior, for example. And they said, yeah, wonderful idea, how do we do that? So then we came up with this joint call topic, ICT2018, Big Data Solutions for Energy. So it's a fruit of this collaboration. I make the same disclaimer. So for this topic in particular, read the work program very carefully. And be aware that it is not only the topic which is under the heading ICT11 Big Data Solutions for Energy, it's also what you find further up in the introduction to platforms and pilots. That matters because there are some common requirements. This is because this project, this topic is described in a different section of the work program. So not at all in the same where we have the usual topics, ICT13, ICT12. This is under different, that's why it has this mysterious acronym DT, which is about the transformation of digital transformation of industries and services. So our colleagues who know better the smart grids, that they tell that we are facing a real challenge, that once the percentage of new energy sources like solar and wind increases a certain percentage, which could be maybe 30%, the grid, electricity grid becomes very problematic. It becomes unpredictable if you don't apply really smart analytic methods of how to manage it. And this is because the grid of the future, and in some countries the grid already today, is a very complex system where you have thousands, hundreds of thousands, even millions of generation sites. So it's no longer a few traditional plants, a nuclear plant there and a couple of coal plants there. No, you have millions of generation sites. They may be solar panels installed on the roofs of consumers, and they feed into the grid. They feed electricity into the grid. Windmills, they are in hundreds of thousands in numbers, and as we know, it's not the wind is not blowing all the time, and the sun is not shining all the time, not even in Vienna. So that the electricity production is highly unpredictable. So it's not like in those traditional power plants where you could program the production levels. And so now you have to live with this uncertainty. And when the percentage of renewable generation sources increases, the unpredictability increases to levels which are unbearable with existing control and grid management technologies. We have to do something differently. So really differently. And there's the additional feature that you also have electric vehicles. You will have more electric vehicles in the future that consume a huge amount of energy when they are being charged. On the other hand, when they are charged and when they are connected to the socket, they are available energy sources for the system. They could be used as energy storage. Collectively, these millions of electric vehicles are a very, very powerful storage of electricity. So all these things mean that there's an exponential increase in the generation of data. So a real big data emerging from the various points in the electricity grids, whether it's a consumption data or production data or transfer of electricity in the different points of the grid. And you have to be able to a certain extent, understand it and predict the behavior of the grid. The next hour or the next few hours is the most crucial. So I will go a bit quicker here because we don't have much time left. Yeah? Yes, okay. Sorry about that. The slides will be made available on the site, event site, in any case. So this is just a summary of the features of the tomorrow's energy grids, as I mentioned. So we have two basic aims in the work program. First of all, to develop and pilot and deploy an architecture that would respond to these challenges, these data analysis and prediction challenges, real-time processing. So again, you need to describe the data flows and the data structures, data sources, amounts of data in a architecture. And then using this architecture, create a toolbox for the grid operators. As simple as that. It sounds very simple, but first an architecture, using that architecture, a toolbox to manage the grid. Okay, and let's go in more detail what the architecture should provide. So first of all, there are all kinds of legacy formats and interfaces in electric grids. So you will learn this from your grid operator partners because you need one in your proposal. The architecture should allow replication and scale up, good characteristics of any architecture, be compliant with applicable standards, and enable the integration of relevant digital technologies, IoT, artificial intelligence, cloud and big data services. Again, easy to say, but maybe not so easy to put in practice. Then what the analytics toolbox should address, and this is very important because all these requirements are requirements in the work program. The toolbox can also offer other services, but it should address in some way at least these services. To be able to handle a wide variety of data, that's clear, support the development of wide range of energy services, and to optimize the management of assets connected to the grids. So assets mean the different generation capabilities and regulating the energy flows, increase the efficiency and comfort of buildings, and make investments less risky, so that you know that the investments you can be more sure about the resulting energy efficiency for investment. These are the basic requirements that the grid operators and the power companies and the energy service companies are looking for, and this is why we put these as requirements in the work program. So to avoid the situation that you address in the proposal some services that will be useless for the grid operators. We have taken these requirements from them. That's why we have them. So then again, read the work program. You will find these requirements in the work program. You should demonstrate in the proposals that you have access to large-scale and realistic data sets. Don't worry, this will probably come from the grid operator that you will have in your consortium. And that this is why you should actually have them in the consortium. So you need network operators, suppliers, independent aggregator in a convenient mix. ESCO, which stands for Energy Services Company. They sell, for example, energy saving services for buildings, building management, renovation sectors, software. Then, of course, to do all this, the wonderful things, you need to have, of course, some software expertise, big data, analytics, but this, I think, is probably the easiest part for the big data community. So that's why I'm stressing the importance of involving the energy sector players. Proposals should address analytics, simulation, prediction, cloud computing. There is a collaboration mechanism, and there's a URL in the work program to the Bridge initiative. The Bridge initiative is something that our colleagues in DG Energy are managing, and the aim of Bridge is to bring together all these new energy projects that result not only from our ICT work program, but from the energy work program as well, because there's another part under the societal challenges of Horizon 2020, which is dealing exclusively with energy challenges. Okay, so impact statements are also very different from the usual impact statements that we have for big data projects. And very important is the integration of the digital technologies, so the effective integration, the effective application of these technologies in the energy sector. This is what we are after. So if you want it in a nutshell, how to integrate the relevant technologies in the energy sector. Enhancing energy asset management, increasing consumer participation, new data-driven business models. So the same thing that applied for the data platforms, here as well, the monetizing models and the business models may be very different from the traditional selling of electricity by the kilowatt hour. I have even heard some radical predictions that in the future we may not pay anything for our electricity. It might be totally free if we allow our personal data or consumption data to be freely used for any purpose. I don't know if this is going to happen, but it is certainly a new business model for the energy sector. So increasing the so how we allow the grids to handle more renewable energy. This is what it's about. So how we can go from the 30% to 50% renewable energy, or even close to 100% of renewable energy. It's possible, but we have to think about electricity storage, for example, when we come to those percentages, and how to manage all this in the grid. So the requirements are important, so I'll spend a few minutes on this. And that the industrial partners, of course, are important because this is a very industrial topic, and that you should remain faithful of the business strategy of the industry partners that are in the consortium, because otherwise it will not work. Also, the system should work in actual operating conditions, so a real electricity grid. situation. And you should be able to evaluate and measure changes in the cost structure, in the technological constraints and the performance. Proposal must account for the ownership, the user right, cost structure and the data assets to be used during and after the pilot. Pay due attention to the GDPR when personal data is being handled. And then, as I said in the beginning, please be aware that there are some common requirements that apply to all platforms, not only this DT-ICT11. In the introductory section of the work program under the heading Platforms and Pilots. So you will find text requirements that apply to all the topics that follow. So read that part. It's a few pages up from this DT-ICT11, if I remember, starting from page 83 of the work program. They are formulated in a rather general way. And finally, the parameters of the call. Please note that we have different closing date than for the previous. So it's not the same call as the ICT13, because for that the deadline was 28th of March. For this call, you have a few more days. The 2nd of April, that's the deadline. The budget available for this is 30 million, expected project size 10 million, so we expect to have 3 projects. It may be 2 or 4, depending on the size of the winning proposals.
It's innovation action.
It's an innovation action, right? IA. Any questions? Here.
Sorry, when you, Manuel Bubiker from United Technologies, when you spoke about the actors, you focused often on the grid. And the energy is not only about the grid. Like when you're talking about the building, the demand side is a big chunk of the energy management and the big data there. So I just wanted clarification to make sure that there's no misunderstanding. Okay,
very good question. Thank you for the question. Indeed, there's a reason for this. Because if you look in the work program, there's a topic DT-ICT10, which is addressing the consumption side more than the grid side. You are right that it is really something that cannot be separated. But we are targeting deliberately the grid side of operations. So that these 2 actions would be complementary, the DT-ICT10 and 11. Buildings, yes, they are important, especially because buildings are generation sites. The buildings may have photovoltaic cells on the roof. They may have vehicles in the car park that are energy storage assets. In that sense, buildings are important. But don't think too much about the consumer part, because this is the focus of the DT-ICT10, which is already done. So DT-ICT11 is about the grid side. So the production electricity and how to always be able to match the electricity production and demand in the grid, so that you don't have a blackout. Or on the other hand, you don't have waste of energy because you are producing too much electricity. There was another question.
I've got the mic already.
Yes, yes.
Chris Mervey from Ikerlan, a research center in Spain. You mentioned at the start that this has the cascade funding mechanism or the third-party financing mechanism. Can you say how you envisage that that could be engaged? And my other question is about large data set. Any idea of volume? Do we need to involve one of the big distributors, or can it be regional distributors, more local, maybe even consumer operated grids?
Okay, first the cascading grants, and I congratulate you that you have well read the work program. If you found that, because it's actually a text which is not in the topic itself, but it is in the introductory part where it says even a percentages of maximum 20% of the grant can go to cascading grants of a size from 50 to 150,000 euro each. So how do you use these cascading grants? It's really hard. It's really hard to say, but I can imagine that certain parts of the operations could be funded with this mechanism. Somebody mentioned buildings. The system, the energy production landscape is so diverse that we thought that this possibility of cascading grant might be useful. Well, actually, it is available for all platforms and pilots, but this may give an additional possibility and instrument for the project, how to bring in additional partners or contributors without actually making them members of the consortium, because that's not necessary. And you may not want to take 15 different site operators or subgrids or buildings, but you may involve them with cascading funding. It is not mandatory to use cascading funding. It's an option. You don't have to do it and don't do it if you don't have a clear rationale why to do it. And then there was another part of the question which I forgot.
Large data sets.
Yes. So
could it be, how big?
Yeah.
Can it only be the big incumbent distribution operators, or can it be more regional?
Right. It's obvious that demonstrator project, even a large-scale demonstrator, like we like to call this, it cannot be the full European wide grid, or not even a full large country. It should be a realistic, meaningful subsystem, but in that subsystem, a realistic setup, a realistic conditions. So the data should then correspond to the management of that sort of subsystem. So the grid operators will say what data they have available, and they probably have a lot of measurement data that they can offer, and then the partner in charge of the data processing and the analytics or the prediction will have to think of if it's possible, what is possible, how to handle this amount of data sets. I just mentioned in this context we had a big data prize that we just concluded. We declared the winners here 3 weeks ago here in Vienna. We have put this. We had grid operator data, huge data for predictions of electricity grid behavior. So we were asking for the best prediction algorithm that could predict how energy is flowing in the grid in the next hour. So we were confronted with this data volume issue already with these huge data sets that we got for these very small problems, and it is foreseeable that the data amounts are really huge. So that's why this is a big data challenge. Otherwise, this would probably appear in the energy work program, but now it appears in our work program. So the data is crucial, and it will be a processing problem and challenge. And hopefully the people in this room know how to respond to that. Okay, there was here a question.
Roberto Zaffarone, ST Microelectronics. This call is clearly driven by the big energy utilities, seen as a prosumer somehow. So my question is very specific. Are you already thinking, or did you already highlight and selected a set of target utilities who are supposed to be available to join or to be proactive in this kind of project proposals? Do we need to address the technology platform for smart grid in Europe? I mean, what's the interlocutor?
Okay, so this is something very important and something that makes us a bit uneasy and nervous. How do we know that we will have good proposals in the end that will actually involve all these players, these grid operators and the energy service companies? So we have made some extra efforts so it's not only in this event that we are advertising this, we also went to advertised this call to the Energy Info Day in Brussels in October. And there were, there you had energy companies, but not data, not big data specialists. So now I hope that you are able to bring these players together, so that it doesn't happen by itself. And of course, I don't know how we could facilitate an event that would actually attract both parties. We have tried to do that in a certain way with the Energy Day, but on the other hand, it remains a challenge for the proposers and those building the consortium how to involve and which players to involve. There are some movement ongoing, actions ongoing. Some people.
Can you tell us
yeah.
who are the main players who are moving?
No, I cannot tell you that because, yeah. Listen, what I can say that have a look at the Energy Info Day proceedings of in October. If something is available on that website, because there is a lot of archived material of that, who others were presenting there. It was a 2 or 3 day event, if I can remember. I wasn't there, but my colleague Stefano Bertolo went to present there. So I don't want to guide you to any direction, and I don't want to tell you that please contact these guys, they are the right ones, they are building the dream proposal. This is what I'm not going to do, so because I want to give you the freedom to build your own proposals, and secondly, because I cannot guarantee that their proposal is going to win. But these requirements that are listed in the work program about what players you should involve is a real requirement, so take it seriously. That's my advice. Sorry about that, cannot help you more than that. Anything else? Still, maybe one last question, so that's the one last question, and then I think the time is up, but I will stay around for questions. Yeah. Then we have one announcement, and very important, yes.
Okay, I'm Tassos Tsitsanis from Suite 5, and since you are talking about actors, I will be a little bit provocative because we are talking about independent aggregators, and the energy people in this room know very well that independent aggregators actually operate for many years and do have data only in the UK and progressively in other countries. So what, let's say, would be your approach towards proposals that involve UK partners, given the situation with Brexit? I assume that the political answer would be the one that I expect, but I just want a confirmation of this.
Well, we are the big data unit. We are supposed to be good in prediction. So, but even the biggest data in the world will not help me to predict the outcome that would determine the answer to your question. So that's why I will give you the standard answer, which is that it's business as usual until it happens. So until the 29th of March, it's business as usual. UK is part of the European Union and eligible as a partner. What happens after that, nobody knows. So thank you for this last question. I still have an announcement. There is something, because people also ask, and it became clear as that you need help to reach out to partners, to find partners and to help. You need help and feedback in proposal writing. So that's why there's a specific activity for that purpose. And we at the Commission, for a long time already, we have given up giving advice on individual proposal ideas. But there is a dedicated service for that, and please say a few words about that. Maybe it even answered to your question about finding the right grid operators.
Yes, so hello, I'm Adina Nemet from Hungary, and I represent national contact points. You have national contact points in every EU member and associated state, and even beyond. And we help you during the period you're preparing your proposal in many, many ways. One of the ways is checking proposal ideas. There's an online form that you can use for that, but also at this event, you can come to us at 11:30 upstairs in room 217. And if you have project ideas, we will check them against the work program and give you some feedback. If you cannot come today, you can always use our online form as well. So at 11:30 at room 217, we welcome you if you would like to check it. Yes?
Just sorry, I'm the UK National Contact Point, so I'd just like to add to Kimo's comments. So the message we're sharing in the UK is that it's business as usual till the end of 2020, not just until March 29th. So the UK government, whatever happens, will underwrite the UK participants for the whole of the programme. So deal or no deal, the message to the UK is business as usual, and the message to everyone here is business as usual till the end of 2020.
Thank you for this reassuring comment.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.